certain number of days. So, um, still I'm struggling to find what that magic number would be.
I'd also like to play devil's advocate and pose something for us to think about, which is, Mike, you had mentioned that, you know, in a lake community, you would expect to see boats and empty trailers and traffic and what have you, right? We're in a canal community, and there are people that use boats, motorized and non-motorized, on the canal that don't have a canal front property and dock, and we have boat launches available. So if we broaden our consideration from the street, you don't have to look very far. I mean, the canal goes right through the middle of the village. So if we think about, you know, from a practical standpoint, like I appreciate consideration of, you know, how many days, is it the front and the back end of the season? Is it so many days on either side of a particular use? As you mentioned, that's a nightmare from an enforcement perspective for everybody involved, right? So maybe stepping back a few steps and zooming out, like thinking about the character of our village is contemplated also by the comprehensive plan. Like, we're trying to highlight the fact that we're a canal community and that that's there as a resource. So while that's not the only factor I think we need to consider, I do think that that comes into play with sort of values of the community as a whole.
So need to consider the character of this particular neighborhood, more so than the fact that, yes, we are a canal community, but the character of this neighborhood doesn't really reflect that very much, in a way.
Actually, since we're on B, right?
Yeah.
Just making sure. You know, the one thing I was noting on that one is, you know, the possibility of screening on that property is actually not very, you'd be back in here for another variance to have that fence was his, to extend it down the property line to try to screen the boat from some of the neighboring areas. And it very quickly also becomes into the sight line of the intersection that's, trying to remember my directions. The Fireside and Homestead corner, which is to the south, basically to the south of where he's at.
I will say screening is an important factor to me. In this special permit arises under Chapter 347, and when 347 refers this to us, it emphasizes the importance of the benefit of screening to the special use permit. And I am trying to balance the desire of the ordinance for, and the emphasis the ordinance puts on screening, with the fact that screening is almost an impracticability in this particular instance.
Unless you're talking about landscaping.
I was going to say, so let me ask the question of the board. If there were large bushes or some sort of shrubbery or trees placed on the property line, does that change the impact to the neighborhood?
mean, in my estimation, I think it would not. And to Jill's point, so there's the ordinance itself says that if the object to be screened is greater than 6 feet tall, this is, right? There's a preference for dense living hedge as the preferred method of screening. But that dense living hedge will not be here for a decade if we planted it now, right? So, at which time, I'm not sure the boat will be here, so.
Well, and, one of the things that is possible for the zoning board of appeals to do is that you can condition an approval on the installation of landscaping that is at a certain height. So, let's say you said, well, we want shrubbery to be present. You could say the installation of the shrubbery has to be at minimum 36 inches at planting. So it is a possibility to condition on that. And I'm not advocating that that's the direction you want to go, but I just want you to let you know that you can condition it on that.
And Philip, I'm pretty sure my hedge that I have around my house gets there pretty fast based on how much I have to trim every year.
Do we want to go on to the next?
Please.
Okay. Will the proposed use create a hazard to health, safety, or general welfare?
The only one that I could see was a potential, impact on the sight lines coming off the intersection to the south. But that's pretty, it's a
Yeah,
bit of a stretch.
for me, that's a stretch. I don't see this as a health and safety issue at all.
Agreed.
Will the proposed use be detrimental to the flow of traffic in the vicinity?
Again, I
No.
don't see that as an issue in this particular instance either.
Will the proposed use alter the essential character of the neighborhood or be detrimental to the residents thereof?
I'm still not sure I know the answer to that question. So, again, it appears to me, I have to say, this strikes me as very much like the neighborhood in Fairport in which I grew up. Small houses, short streets, very residential. And I think I would, in that neighborhood, I would have probably found storing a boat like this in the driveway to be problematic.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last.
Growing up in that neighborhood, I would have probably found that to be problematic.
Okay.
Right? At the same time, that was an era in which nobody went near the canal. In a boat, in swimming, you just didn't do it. Right? So the canal is not the thing it is today. And it's not, and as it's already been pointed out, if our comprehensive plan emphasizes the attractiveness if it would add the canal village, that does change the equation.
Well, let me play devil's advocate a bit
Please.
then. If the premise is that it's acceptable when used on the canal, is it then a limitation that the only way that you can store a boat in your driveway is if it's used on the canal?
No, I think that's backwards. I think the canal is an invitation to have a boat in your driveway, not a promise that you're going to use it there.
But is that justification for that it will be used on the canal?
Not in itself,
Okay.
but these criteria are cumulative, right?
Mm.
So to the extent that we want to encourage one thing, but that requires mitigating factors in some other respect. That's the balancing act we have to play.
I would agree with that, and I also think, I struggle with this particular criteria because there are two components. So it's the use will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood nor be detrimental to the residents thereof. I don't really see how this is detrimental to the residents thereof in an isolated sense.
It's one thing to simply say, like it. It's another thing to have detrimental implies an injury of some kind.
Right.
Right, and I tend to agree that
And we've
this is,
contemplated those things in some of the other criteria also
Correct.
for our discussion.
Do you think it will alter the essential character? So the presence of a boat in a driveway.
I'll go first if you want a minute to think.
yeah. Um, see, I think my answer is a tiny bit. Right. But we have had a number of cases come before us during my tenure on the board where we have made concessions to the reality of the way we live in Fairport today, not the Fairport that I grew up in, right? So we allow cars to be parked in a driveway because the houses were built with single-car garages, right? Living by it in its own right changes the essential character of the neighborhoods, and we adapt, grudgingly perhaps, but we adapt. And this strikes me as one of those where perhaps grudgingly we adapt to the reality that Fairport is a community in which people who can't afford boats choose to live.
I don't have anything to add to that. I think that was well said.
So all the way through that, and I still don't have a solution to this dilemma.
Well, that's what I was going to ask for.
I'm said in an earlier conversation that I'm open to persuasion here, but I'm still on the fence.
Do you think that there's additional information that would strengthen your decision either way, that you want to hold the case for additional information? Or do you think you're ready to take action?
I personally can't think of anything that's appropriate for the board to request. I mean, the item brought up earlier was, sort of whether there had been an exploration of alternatives and reasons for feasibility. I think that that's not, well, I would hope that that's the case, and this is being asked for because there are no real other feasible options. It's not in the board's purview to decide, for example, what's affordable and what's not affordable. Like, we're here to just consider the facts of the cases that are presented. I think I personally would like to be explicit about, as we consider the application, a condition that the parking definitely not exceed the May to October timeframe, which sounds like, from a practical nature, is when it is present anyway. So, whichever way we end up going, I would personally suggest that we add that condition.
So I'm strongly influenced by the policy statement in the ordinance that looks to screening and particularly to dense hedging when, and while we don't have it, so we could take a step in that direction by doing what Bill suggests, starting with a hedge of some height that may one day serve that purpose. So if we're going to put a temporal limit of 6 months on it, then I think coupled with some attempt at screening, in combination, creates a situation that we could live with.
Philip, you're thinking something along the lines of like the column or boxwood that I would have that around my house that reach a 9-foot height, something of significant size that would be capable of screening the boat in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, there are any number of plants that could do that. I've seen privet hedges that would fit the bill. I've seen arbor vitae that would fit the bill. I'm a lawyer by training, not an arborist, so.
Well, and based on that, if that is the direction that the zoning board wishes to go, I suggest that you not limit the species.
Oh, I wouldn't attempt to.
But
That's my answer to Aaron's question.
yeah, but I do suggest that part of that condition be that the dense living hedge be maintained through the duration of the boat storage. And I say that because sometimes landscaping has a tendency to be installed and then perhaps not maintained. And the goal of the dense living hedge is to provide that screen.
I think my big question, if you put a set of condition of a dense living hedge, where would you put it? How far would it extend? What's it'd be really hard to screen that boat with a dense living hedge, especially where it's, parked right now.
Well, the bulk of the neighborhood exists to the south of this property. Homestead, this is essentially at the crossroads between Homestead and Fireside, right? There are more houses further south on Homestead. There are houses on the cul-de-sac east and west on Fireside, right? So from where, I don't remember how many exactly there are, but there may be 8 houses between this property and Whitney Road, right? So it does serve an effective screening purpose for a significant proportion of the neighborhood. Not perfect, but better than no screening at all.
So I just want to make sure that I understand when we flip to the survey. So are you indicating that the north property line is where you would want to stand? I'm looking at page
No,
12.
I'm thinking the south property line is
So closer to Fireside. That's the
closer to
south.
Fireside, yeah,
Okay.
as sort of an extent. Imagine it as an extension of the fence, although
Okay.
it can't be an extension of the fence because there aren't separate properties.
Mhm. Okay.
So, Philip, just kind of following up with an additional item or thought about this, what about a shorter living hedge on the north side? It would certainly assist in, or some other type of landscaping on the north side of the drive to help provide additional.
I would have no objection to that. I just didn't consider it.
And I think in terms of the other question that I think I kind of took away from what Mike asked earlier is how far down the drive would you go? Is it appropriate to only go the length of the boat and its trailer?
I think to go much farther than that, I think you present a problem for traffic going southbound, right? Because that now blocks the view of oncoming traffic from your left towards the intersection. So yeah, I wouldn't go much farther. I doubt I'd go farther than halfway down the driveway. I might even say, if that boat is 22 feet long, yeah, I'll cut some slack on that and go, 12, 16 feet, not 20. I'm open to, as to say, I'm open to persuasion on that.
So let me ask this then, because I want to make sure that we're vetting this. And what would be the reasoning? The code talks about screening of that recreational vehicle.
Yeah.
So what would be the reasoning for not having screening be the length of the recreational vehicle in question?
I'd prefer it.
Okay,
I would prefer it, but, I took Aaron's question to be, does it have to be that far? I said, no, I'm not committed to that, but I prefer it.
if everyone could look at page 12, and I'm gonna apologize right off the, well, no, okay.
Just drag. You got it.
I'm not moving it. You are, okay. Yes, please. You must have noticed that I'm not doing a good job scrolling. So on page 12, this is the survey map. And you can see from the corner of the property to the right of way, there's about 35 feet.
Mhm.
So if we discussed before and the applicant responded that the boat is 22 feet in length, I guess let's use that as the starting point for,
Okay.
And the inset for the garage is about 4 feet, if I'm reading that right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, would you request that hedge begin at the southwest corner of the structure?
Yes, at a line that is an extension of the garage door,
Yup, and runs
20 feet
West.
to the west.
for how many feet?
I would say, well, if we're gonna cover most of the boat, I'd say 20 feet.
Would you place that on the lot line? Or,
Closest is reasonable to allow for maintenance of it. I don't want to create a situation where we have a trespass on the adjoining property.
do we want to say 2 feet in from the lot line to allow for maintenance?
That's fine by me,
Can I ask a question?
absolutely.
So the jet ski that's currently stored next, adjacent to the garage wall, between the garage and the fence, if that were pushed back behind the house, that would be within code for storage?
It would, yes.
Okay. If we as a board are requesting landscape screening to start at the corner of the garage, that's going to preclude the use of getting really effectively anything to the side of that garage and into the backyard. So we're potentially creating a hardship by trying to solve this issue or mitigate this issue, right?
Yep, you could say that it's start 4 feet off of that corner, in line with the bump out of the house.
But if you're driving a trailer and trying to line it up with your 5 feet of space, I mean, you can speak to this, right? You're trying to, I think it's tricky.
You're certainly not driving the jet ski around behind the house.
You're not driving it around the house, but you're positioning it so that you could then, I
Yeah,
assume, lift the
You lift the tongue and
tongue
roll
of
it
the,
back.
and,
Yeah.
right, but you're not gonna wanna hand maneuver around the corner of the garage in between the corner of the garage and a hedge of our drive either. Like, no. That's just not practical.
Yeah.
So I think we have to just be careful. I'm not opposed to screening.
I take your point, but storing the jet ski there is a non-compliance issue also.
Storing it where it currently is
Where it currently
pictured,
is.
but using that as an avenue to get it behind the house is not. And if we take that away,
Yeah.
then it will either also end up in the driveway, potentially,
Right.
and need, I just want to be careful.
What's the width from the back corner of the garage to the lot line?
5 feet. 5 feet on one side and 5.5 feet on the other.
And there's landscaping on the north side that would reduce that 5 feet,
Right.
practically speaking, and air conditioner and some other things that appears.
Does it address your concern if we start the hedge at rather than at the line of the garage door, at the line of the front of the house?
I don't think that geometry works with a trailer. How long is a jet ski trailer? 9 feet? I mean, it's been a while since I took geometry, but that's a pretty hard angle to cut. I mean, the reality is, if you're driving from the north to the south, you're not gonna plant arborvitae or some 6-foot hedge on the north side of the driveway in front of the house.
Right.
And if you plant it on the property line on the north side, I'm not suggesting that we contemplated this, but if you did it on that side, as soon as you get past that, the front of this lawn is 66 and a half feet long,
But I was
right?
contemplating planting the hedge on the south property line, not the
Sure.
north.
But if we're talking about screening from the neighborhood,
Yeah,
screening on the south side lot line only solves part of the screening issue.
Agreed.
Because as soon as you get, as soon as you approach from the north, you see a boat in the driveway.
agreed.
If you're
So-
across the street from their property, you see a boat in the driveway because you're not gonna screen the front of the driveway. So when you add the potential hardship of not being able to use the backyard for potentially a smaller craft storage, I don't know if it warrants the expense.
I'm trying to implement the code's preferences and policies here. It's an imperfect solution, but it is a step in the direction of what the code itself says is a priority. Wonder at this point if this, we ought to table this application for the time being and bring it back before us in a month's time.
Well, if you're going to do that, then I would want to have what additional information you're requesting from the applicant.
Okay,
That will help you make that decision.
Looking at Jamie's concern coupled with the concept of screening, sorry, I almost said shrubbery, but this is not a Monty Python movie. Looking at those two, one of those might be the length of the jet ski and its trailers, so that we can try to ascertain whether it's possible or what the radius of curvature would need to be away from the corner of the garage and the fence to get it in and out. But are there other thoughts?
Well, I think another thought is, would the applicant be willing to consider the cost of installing said living hedge? You know, I just looked up, just for an example, arborvitae, you know, anywhere range from, you know, $79, $38 a tree. Multiply that times 10. Maybe, I don't know however many you're gonna need. It may be cheaper to store those somewhere else. You know, that's something that we have to consider, and I just don't know if that's gonna,
but that's not our call to make, right?
excuse me,
That's really not our call to make,
it's not our call to make.
right? This is, yeah, so confronted, the applicant then becomes confronted with a choice of which of two options is more affordable,
Right.
right? You know.
So I think we have two questions. One, are we adding, do we agree on the condition of storage from May to October for consideration of the application? So maybe three questions. Two, are we conditioning on addition of screening? And or three, do we have additional information that we would like to table the application?
I don't think the screening is gonna be, would be a desirable outcome for the concerns of character of the neighborhood. I don't think you're gonna achieve the end desire of what you're kind of looking for. That's just my opinion.
Can I just clarify that? Are you saying that you don't think that the screening would be, or that you think the screening would be irrelevant in terms of achieving the,
Exactly.
okay.
So, other than, so, I understand Mike's position, other than a limitation on time, you would not impose any other conditions at all?
I'm not really sure. I think, you know, your limitation on time, there should be a time when the citizens of the community should be able to have recreational vehicles, per se, in their driveway for maintenance, you know, pre-use, post-use, things like that. I guess I just worry about, sure, it's a boat, but then, you know, the next door neighbor says, oh, I'm gonna put a boat up, and then I'm gonna have my, you know, my RV next to it, and then, and I'm not, you know, so I think we go on and on and on.
Well, to clarify though, we would, that would be a separate one, it would be a separate special use permit, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and two, what we're considering, this is more for my clarification, but also on the record, what we're considering is for this year.
Correct. So the code requires that if a special permit is issued, that it comes back within a year for review.
Okay,
So
so we would
if-
see this again
Correct.
no later than next July.
Correct. And if the applicant does not comply with whatever conditions you may put on the approval, then that gives you reason to not renew the special permit.
So we would have an opportunity to consider on an annual basis and consider public input and what have you, just like we have this evening.
Correct. The code does note that, so at that next return of the special permit, you are able to approve it for a period of 5 years, but that doesn't mean that you have to. So with special permits, if you find that use has, you want to ensure that those conditions are being met. And again, code enforcement does do that when an approval is issued and there are conditions associated with that approval. That's what code enforcement is utilizing. But if the zoning board wants to review that application on an annual basis, that's within your purview. I would also suggest that you add, as a condition, that the applicant submit annually both registration and inspection for the trailer and for the boat.
Okay. We have another case to consider, so I'm gonna ask, are we comfortable as a board adding the following conditions to this application? One, that the boat storage parking in the driveway does not exceed the time period between May, we have to say May 1st and October 31st. And that the applicant submits a current registration and proof of inspection and registration for both the boat and the trailer. And do we also have to add the condition that we'll review it again next year? That
No, it's
happens
automatic,
Okay.
correct. I didn't hear anything about landscaping.
I'm proposing that we not put a condition for landscaping, but that's something that we can discuss.
So I could be in the minority on this one, so I'm not gonna insist on it.
I presume that that's something that we could revisit next.
Correct. So if you chose to approve, it would come back within a year. And if you found through documentation, whether it be oral or written, that there was concerns about screening, you could then add that condition.
So I would place the burden on the applicant to demonstrate the feasibility or non-feasibility of such a proposal, of such a solution
For the future,
for if you, in the reapplication.
okay. So I would suggest that that be a recommendation of the board, that the applicant at the next time that this is before the zoning board of appeals, demonstrate the feasibility of the addition of the dense living hedge.
I can live with that.
And do we also add the condition of removing the jet ski from its current location or bringing it into compliance by relocating it to the backyard?
I would say removal of jet ski or relocation so that storage is compliant with the code.
Jill, do you want to summarize and reread those?
Yep.
Or is everybody comfortable with the 4 conditions that are
3 conditions, 1 recommendation, so I'll read this out. So the motion is to store a recreational vehicle, a boat, in the driveway of 9 Homestead Drive on condition that the boat may be stored from May 1st to October 31st. That,
That's kind of what's going on right now.
Right.
correct?
that proof of registration and inspection be submitted annually for the trailer and for the boat, and for the removal of the jet ski or relocations of the jet ski so that storage is compliant with the code. And the recommendation that the applicant demonstrate the feasibility of a dense living hedge for the future application.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve this application, to consider this application as conditioned?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
So you were approved, and you'll receive a letter, and you'll have to demonstrate compliance with those conditions. Okay. All right.
Anything else you guys need from me, or?
Nope, not at this time.
Okay.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Okay, case number 2.
All right, let me get that organized. Okay, this is case 2. The case type is an area variance. The address is 10 Perrin Street. The request is to expand an existing driveway that as proposed will not be the requirements of driveways. I don't think I mentioned the applicant being the voter. I apologize. Dave, if you could come up to the podium, and if you could give us a description of your request.
Hello, my name is Dave Bedore, and I own 10 Parent Street. Basically, went to take the walkway on either side of the driveway and incorporate it into a single surface, removing the steps at the end before the sidewalk. Maintaining the same footprint, which if it's dug out would be going back in the same spot.
Is your intention, so in maintaining the same footprint, would your intention be to use what currently serves as the sidewalk to the front steps in front of the red door as driveway?
Yeah,
And this is a multifamily home, 2-family?
two-family, correct.
Is the entrance on the south side of the dwelling, the entrance to the second unit?
Yes, it is.
So the sidewalk on the south side of the current single driveway serves as the walkway to that, the access to that
I
unit?
mean, you can utilize the main walk in front of the red door, and then there's space behind the vehicles to walk around.
Okay, but you're envisioning
Yeah, I mean, there's,
resurfacing what is currently there as two sidewalks and a driveway into a double wide driveway.
yes, single surface, yeah.
Okay. Do other board members have questions?
If I may, Mr. Fodor,
Sure.
how many vehicles, this is your home and that of a tenant?
Yes.
Okay, so cumulatively, how many, between you and your tenant, I'll use that word because I don't know,
Sure.
and it's not important.
Yep.
But you and the other residents, how many vehicles total are owned by the group, the whole house?
Three.
3?
Yep. So we do utilize off-street parking.
Where?
In front. And on the opposite side of the street, there's also,
On-street parking?
yeah, or I'm sorry, yeah, I'm sorry, not off-street, on-street parking.
Okay.
The driveway
Since-
itself is very old, and then if I have to do it, I'd rather do it that way, if possible.
So at any given time, there's only room for one car. At the moment, there's only room for one car.
Technically, yes.
Okay. Why change the pattern?
To accommodate one, at least one vehicle for each unit, myself and the tenant. For what it is, it's probably way under in parking.
I don't dispute that, but the code with which we're working discourages expanding non-conforming uses. The driveway is such a non-conforming use, it doesn't meet the current requirements. If I build this house today, I could put that driveway in it.
Correct.
But why should I go for, I've got a one-car driveway, want to expand it to 2. Code says I shouldn't let you do that. So why should I?
Why should you?
Yeah, why should I?
Because, I mean, the curb cut is cut for double. I'd like to resurface, the concrete's cracked and it's pitched towards my foundation. So that's one of the big reasons I have a cobblestone foundation. Above ground, you'll see it's got block, cement block, but below it, it's cobblestone. And if you look, I thought there was another page here. I don't know what page this
I
is.
think page, yep, I'm looking at that right now.
Yeah.
The number is sort of hidden, but it's page 15, and you can see where it looks like
So-
there's some concrete.
Yeah, so I had 12 yards of concrete installed to kind of shore up the foundation on the one side in pitch so that it sheds water. So I can't really do something like that on the other side. So the best alternative would be to redo the concrete. The concrete is not only cracked, it's kind of separated in certain spots, so it just funnels water and you can see when a heavy rain comes, not only is it pitched towards the house, it also just draws it in because it pools during heavy rain.
Looking at this picture, I assume that the grass in the foreground, it roughly defines your property line. Am I right?
Correct.
But the driveway is paved behind that.
That my
Okay.
neighbor did that. That would be Jeff Sale.
Do you have some kind of agreement with him about bringing that over the property line?
Nothing written,
Handshake deal?
sort of,
Okay.
yeah.
Will he let you drive on the driveway?
Yeah. I assume so.
Okay. I said,
It's never come up.
you know, one of the reasons why the code says I shouldn't let you do this is that it would like you to get rid of that driveway in the front of the yard and park your car somewhere else. How about the backyard?
Well, I would have to get an agreement to get access there.
Yeah, but you already have an agreement, right? You're just gonna modify it a bit.
I don't have anything in the backyard that can facilitate parking right now. It's a kind of
I'm
a
not
small
sure I
yard.
understand what you're telling me.
Okay.
Um, you could,
Are you just saying that at this point in time, you have no like concrete pad or nothing like that in the backyard at this moment?
It's just a yard.
Yeah.
It's not a very
Right.
big yard.
but, no, so why not, it's essentially, take the new asphalt or concrete that you propose to put in the front yard.
Yep,
And put it in the backyard instead, and take the grass from the front yard and put it in the front yard.
but that's not my
instead.
property.
Your backyard isn't your property?
No, the driveway
Yeah,
is not my
But you
property.
just said you could make a deal with your neighbor to use it.
But when he could terminate that at any point, couldn't he?
Well, that, I mean, you'd probably have to get an easement and record it, but
Okay,
once that were in play, I mean, if you know, by, you know, it's the consideration he gets from you to put asphalt on your property, you get the right to drive over the driveway and put your car in the backyard. It's a big deal, right?
well, I'm putting a fence up, actually, so it's gonna be blocked off. Because I don't know if he went before this board, but there's no place to plow snow. So he has literally plowed in the winter straight into the middle of my backyard. And the snow's been about that high, which I have pictures of. And there's like no regard for my property. And so they have this big parking lot. They can't plow it on the other side of the parking lot because they don't, and if you look, is it the last page? Shows an empty lot. Can't help you there, unless you brought up like Google. But his entire property is got either structure or pavement, except for the little strip in the front yard.
So part of the deal you strike is he plows your driveway too, right?
Let me ask this, is it of interest, is it the desire of the zoning board to hold action until the applicant can explore the possibility of an easement to allow for that? For what has been discussed?
would be interested in that.
I would be interested in that too, but I was concerned that there be no fence installed until we have an answer to that question. So then
It's
I
purchased
judge-
fence,
Yeah, see, there's.
and I have a
problem
permit
right
for
there,
it.
Right? So if the applicant can close that option by putting the fence up, then we're back to ground square one.
Mhm. Yep,
And so the repair work that you're talking about, if we focus back on the current
Yeah,
degraded surface in front of the house, that could be done replacing the two individual sidewalks and the single parking area. You could upgrade that and maintain those, the left and the right as sidewalks with a single parking space.
sure.
Okay. I mean, I think one of my concerns is that the code also talks about not parking on front yards and particularly in front of front doors. So in looking at this, I'm trying to contemplate how one gets a side-by-side parking situation while still maintaining at least the walkway to the front door, like the visible street-facing front door.
The red door. Yeah.
And I have concerns about access to the residents, the side access to the, what I presume is the rear side residence. If two cars are parked side by side. Where's the mail delivered to?
There's a bump out.
So on the south side of the house?
On the far side of that, right next to the door to the upstairs.
So parking two cars side by side, assuming they were there at the same time, is gonna limit access to that rear entrance also.
Not really. I mean, the vehicles, if you're parked there right now, you can walk up the sidewalk and around the front of the vehicles if they're pulled in.
But what you're saying is the sidewalk will effectively become driveway,
Um,
and two cars parked side by side would consume most of that 18-foot width. The standard
Yeah.
parking spot is 9 by 19.
yeah. So it'll be close.
As the chairman suggests, the code says we can let you fix it, right? Just can't let you expand it, which is what you're proposing to do. So
So-
there's much merit to what she's suggesting.
Okay.
Has the board had a chance to take a look at additional photographs and measurements that Ms. Weidrich entered into the application and record? I think it would be probably good for us to,
I'm interested to learn looking at the photograph with the two cones, the distance from the cone on the left
which page are you looking at?
is south on page 17.
Okay. So the distance between the cones is 18 feet,
So between the cones is 18 feet.
correct?
Okay, that's a lot more than I thought it was.
and if you
If you took away the north cone and put the north cone next to that existing walkway up to the door, that gives you about 16 feet. Am I correct then?
So the
Or-
distance of that sidewalk, right in front of the door is 4.5 feet.
Oh, so it's way more than that.
Correct. And the 18 feet goes a little bit past the existing sidewalk.
So the other measurement that I was looking at, you can see it on page, you can see the cones head on page 16 that represents the property line on the south side of the property. And then if you look at page 18, there's the 20-foot width representation between the two cones.
So between, if we were looking at the property line, and I hate to make you flip back, and you don't need to, but the property line page on page 16, the distance between the cones is 21.7 feet.
Right. So if you take out the 4.5 feet that represents the sidewalk that leads to the steps that go to the red door, you're left with little over 17 feet.
Which is close.
It's on the property line.
But it's not on the property line, it's close for, you know, the end desire is to put two cars off the street on the property in the wintertime. That's what you're really looking to do.
Yeah, and when I was out at the site today, I also had the opportunity to measure a Subaru from mirror to mirror Forester, and that totals 7 feet.
What kind of vehicles are we, and this can change over time, but just out of
Right.
curiosity? what-
I have a compact pickup truck.
And the other vehicle would be something similar?
Yeah, midsize.
And again, I mean, that, we're not gonna condition it on
No.
those kinds of vehicles.
No,
parking,
but-
but
Yeah,
just for-
no, can I ask the applicant a question?
Sure.
What is the minimum distance, minimum width that you think would work for having for the driveway?
So, just kind of trying to compute everything that's going on. If, I think if we took the walkway on the right and keeping in mind, we want to kind of maintain that and just kind of narrow it a little bit. Inward to the right and maintain the line of the walkway on the right going towards the steps in the door, I think that would be plenty with going leftward a little bit. In the curb cut, on the left, still maintains flower bed space.
I'm just curious, not necessarily a question for you, but
Sure.
since we have our code enforcement person here in the room, I was just kind of curious if anybody happens to know what the width of a sidewalk is supposed to be in the village going up to the front door?
I believe for ADA compliant, it's 6 feet. Is that correct, Mark? Mark, do you mind coming up to your microphone?
The egress for a house is 36 inches for a front door. Every house has to have 36 inches. There's no specific for sidewalk outside of it, but if you're going to have a sidewalk, it should be somewhere around that. But the building code doesn't necessarily address the sidewalk outside of the house.
Because you could have stone steps or something like that, or
Yep.
pavers, or gravel, or stone dust, or whatever.
Correct. The building code just wants you to be able to get out of the house.
Then what
Once you're
happens
out.
once you're out?
Somebody else's problem.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mark.
So I guess one thing I'm looking for a solution, like everyone else here on the board, is, you know, a solution that I think of is kind of what I was thinking about, is narrowing that existing sidewalk leading up that door. And while the flower bed is nice, the flower bed may need to be compromised if your desire is to park two vehicles there side by side. I believe that we would probably have to reissue this proposal if we were to put the driveway border, very close to the property line, closer than it's proposed right now.
No, we could continue, and the reason being is the request is to expand an existing driveway that is proposed will not meet the requirements of new driveways.
So there's flexibility there.
Right.
I would be interested in the property owner's position on that
We
Property
received a letter of
12.
support already, but
for the proposal, not the.
Right,
you
but
know,
not for
if
what-
it were to be modified toward the property line, I think which would,
merit reposting and letting him.
well, I don't know
Want me to
procedurally.
ask them right now?
Well, so this is an option. So you could hold decision and request that either the property owner located at the neighboring property, well, first off, that that you talk about with the applicant what may be acceptable in terms of moving closer to that property line. And then based on that the neighboring property owner provide your feedback on that proposal, and then you could take action.
Considering the implication that all of that vegetation would probably need to be removed,
Correct,
or a
but,
large portion of it.
but you could also condition an approval on the installation of landscaping,
Where?
if there's room. Based on, I don't, we probably all have an idea of how close you
Sure.
might be willing to go to that property line. So I guess let's have a conversation about that. What is the appetite for the zoning board? How close do you think is acceptable for that driveway to expand to that setback?
Well, I mean, I refer to this awesome picture right here. You know,
That's actually from the survey. This is a chance to talk about the Historic Resources Survey from 1976. That is a picture right out of that survey provided to us by our historian.
I was would be a wee lad then, but anyway. You take that particular photograph and you see that sidewalk in the condition that it's in right there. You go over a few feet to the other side of that sidewalk, you could almost envision two vehicles there very easily. So that's just something, if you're in desire, just put two cars there. I think that's your possible best solution, and I think it's in the best interest of, the code that you're not parking in front of the front door. And that's something that this board has been, adhering to, since I've been on the board for a good long time now. So I think it's a desirable outcome for the community, is to not having vehicles parked in front of front doors. And I think that kind of offers a little bit of a solution for that. Now, you're not going to put two GMC Sierras there,
No.
but,
Or boat?
or a boat.
No.
You had to say that.
Or even two pickup trucks,
I'm sorry?
or even two pickup trucks,
They're small.
if they're small.
Yeah, I typically, I've always had kind of small vehicles. And the only reason I got the truck I have now is because it's a small vehicle.
Whereas my truck, I have to put the windows, mirrors in when I go into the garage area. And I'm taking them off before.
Yeah.
So between the existing driveway, the sidewalk nearest the south property line and the south property line, there's 4 feet.
So I guess how much is that going to give us then?
So if we subtracted, would you want to stick with the 4.5 feet for the sidewalk? So as Mark said, the code doesn't have a requirement as to how wide that sidewalk might be. The existing sidewalk, the southern sidewalk, is 2.5 feet. So at some point, somebody said 2.5 feet is acceptable for the width of a sidewalk towards an entry. So is 2.5 feet appropriate for that front door?
I think it depends on how wide the stairs are. Because like, I guess I'm envisioning the sidewalk is gonna be flush with the south or left as you look at the front of the house.
Yeah.
Edge of the stairs, right? So that's wider than the actual door. But if you have the driveway encroach to the north, then you're effectively creeping in on parking in front of the front door.
So what if we
So-
did this, because I'm getting the sense that there's a lot of design questions that we're not gonna be able to address here. What if the applicant, taking in the feedback that he's received thus far from board, go back and consider redesign? And I can work with the applicant on that and then engage with the neighboring property owner.
I think a drawing would be really helpful with
Correct.
distances measured out in terms of what is feasible and also represents what your vision is for doing that. And then we could, I think several of us, if not all of us, visited, drove by. We didn't sort of walk around the back or whatever, but I think combining a sketch, it doesn't have to be, you can do it on a napkin or sheet of paper, it doesn't have to be something you have hired
Okay.
done.
Sheet of paper,
Doesn't have to
please.
be at scale, but having measurements written down for certain places is helpful for us to be able to envision how walking traffic would work, how, that sort of thing. And where the driveway lines would be in relation to property line and curb cut and what have you.
Would the board be interested in seeing the entire project be one material? Or is it your preference that there be different materials? Or would it all be concrete and that walkway stamped concrete? Can the board talk a little bit with the applicant about what that may look like?
And I think to ensure that that sidewalk in front of the door does not become a driveway, I like the idea of one material because I think for installation, it's probably easiest and most cost effective. But to have it stamped or somehow distinguished so that, really truly you're meeting like the intent of if the
The spirit
approval
that it's
is
not a
to
place you're gonna park.
get an extra space and we work with you there, that it really truly doesn't become you're encroaching on parking in front of the door and in front of the, in the front yard kind of a thing. I think we're trying to find,
I can do that. I have concrete stamps. And hopefully that's not, I don't have to, I don't know. I only have, I think, one set of stamps left, and it's a London cobble, so it looks like cobblestone. Just as a heads up.
I mean, something, just to distinguish that it's a,
Yeah.
it's a sidewalk, not a driveway, and, I assume that the people using the space will hopefully adhere to, the spirit of that if this moves forward.
Yep. I just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just saying, I think it's, also needed, so each unit has a short distance for things like groceries and stuff like that.
And you're contemplating, that the material would extend back to that second entrance?
I would widen it to 3 feet instead of the 2.5, and pitch it away from the house. Every time it rains right now, I get a little trail from that side, all the way through the whole basement, because the basement's pitched. So I have everything on pallets right now, so it just runs underneath. It goes from the little bump out window on the first floor, where the sidewalk is in the entrance to the second floor, all the way to the front corner on the right side.
Okay.
So the floor's clean.
I appreciate the investment and desire to improve the property for sure.
Yeah.
Is there any additional information that board members would like to see before we consider the case?
I have to say, I'm still not persuaded that we should expand the non-conforming use here. So those designs have got to be pretty good when they come back.
Well, let's do this. Let's take a vote on whether or not to hold the application. And what will happen is the items that you've discussed will follow up with the applicant with a letter. That letter will then be part of the future application so that you can review what has been submitted against that. So based on requesting that a drawing demonstrates what this new updated proposal is, that also the walkway be distinguished so that it's not a place where someone would park. And also, I heard that the applicant is proposing to widen the sidewalk at the rear to be 3 feet and pitched away from the house, and also that there be engagement with the neighboring property owner.
And can we just add consideration for landscape removal, replacement, you know, whatever the new design might allow, based on, just to have some thoughts around that.
Jill, you do mean the southern property owner, the one at the left?
Correct. The address would be 12.
Okay, thank you.
So based on that, I'll ask the board, is there a motion to hold the application pending additional information?
I move to hold the application.
Okay, give me a second here. Okay, and let's take a quick vote on that.
All in favor of holding the application?
Okay. We'll talk about rescheduling. The next hearing would be at the end of August. If that's something that you,
Okay. My only concern is I'm proposing concrete. I don't want to get too far because once it's dug out, it has to settle.
understood,
Okay.
understood. You're talking to two people that did a lot of concrete inspection in their previous lives.
Okay.
So we understand.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so, we'll be in contact
Yep.
and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. No more questions?
Oh.
How quickly do I need to have this to you? Sounds good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor?
I
Have a good evening, everybody.